My name is Susan Smith, and I'm 32 years old. If loyalty were a person, I think it would look a lot like me, quiet, steady, and maybe a little naive. I used to believe that showing up for someone every single day was the purest form of love. I was wrong. I met Nelson 5 years ago at a friend's barbecue, the kind of lazy summer afternoon where everything smells like grilled corn and sunscreen. He was standing by the cooler laughing too loudly at his own joke. I remember thinking he looked like the type who'd never known silence. I was drawn to him instantly. Back then, I worked as a systems engineer at a mid-sized firm downtown. Long hours, lots of screens, very little excitement. Nelson, on the other hand, was a freelance graphic designer with an overflowing sketchbook and a dream of opening his own studio. Where I saw risk, he saw potential. That contrast, my stability against his chaos, felt intoxicating. From the beginning, I wanted to be his calm. He used to say I was the anchor he didn't know he needed, and I believed him. When his design agency folded during a market downturn, I covered the rent on our tiny apartment without a second thought. I paid for his online courses, introduced him to contacts from my office, even helped him pitch clients over takeout dinners that blurred into midnight. There were nights when I'd come home exhausted from debugging code all day, only to sit beside him and proofread proposals while he sketched logo drafts on napkins. He'd look up, grin, that crooked grin, and say, "What would I do without you, Elle?" I didn't correct him. I thought love meant being useful. When my company offered me a promotion that required relocation to Seattle, I turned it down. Nelson had just landed his first big client, and I didn't want to disrupt his momentum. "We're a team," I told him. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're my whole foundation." I took that as proof I'd done the right thing. But even then, small things started to shift. It began with his phone, how he'd tilt it slightly away when messages came in. Then the sudden interest in industry mixers that lasted late into the night. When I'd ask how they went, he'd smile absently. "Networking's everything, babe. You'd be bored." I tried not to overthink it. Nelson was naturally social, and I was not. So I busied myself with work, made plans for our future, started saving for a down payment. Even researched neighborhoods where we might buy our first home. One evening, as we were cooking together, he said out of nowhere, "You ever feel like life's too safe?" I laughed softly. "Safe sounds like a good thing." He shrugged, flipping a piece of chicken in the pan. "Yeah, but sometimes I want more. Something new. Exciting." Something about the way he said it lodged itself in my chest. After dinner, he disappeared into his studio room to finish some concepts. I sat alone on the couch, half listening to the faint hum of his playlist through the door. It used to be comforting, the sound of his creativity. That night, it felt like distance. Over the next few weeks, he became increasingly restless. Our evenings turned into parallel routines, he in his corner, headphones on me, pretending not to notice the detachment. One Sunday morning, as I made coffee, I asked, "Hey, want to go hiking next weekend? We haven't done anything outdoors in forever." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Can't. There's this art event Maya invited me to." "Maya." He smirked, finally glancing up. "Just a creative director I met through a client. She's helping me expand my circle." "Right," I said. "Expanding." He caught the tone, but ignored it. "You should be happy for me, Elle. You always say you want me to grow." I forced a smile. Of course. Always. But the coffee that morning tasted like metal. That night, I lay awake, listening to the rain tapping against the window. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that Nelson was just chasing his professional dreams and nothing more. Still, the unease clung to me, heavy and shapeless. I didn't know it yet, but the foundation I thought I'd built so carefully was already starting to crack, and the person I trusted most was holding the hammer. The night everything changed was one of those evenings that look cozy from the outside but feel hollow when you're living inside them. Rain against the windows, a candle flickering on the counter, pasta bubbling on the stove. I'd made Nelson's favorite creamy mushroom linguine with white wine and garlic. A peace offering, though I couldn't say what war I was trying to end. He came home later than usual, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, something floral, expensive, and new. "Long day?" I asked, stirring the sauce to hide my unease. "Yeah," he said, setting his phone face down on the table. "You wouldn't believe how exhausting networking is." I smiled weakly. placed his plate in front of him, and waited for the sound of forks against porcelain to fill the silence. Instead, he leaned back, eyes steady on mine, measured, rehearsed. My stomach tightened. "Susan," he began, voice, "even we need to talk about us." I hate those words. They never mean good things. He set down his fork, clasped his hands together like he was about to present a proposal. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about where we're going, about life, and I think we should open our relationship." I froze mid-breath. Open. As in... He smiled gently, as if softening the blow. As in, we give each other space to explore other connections. Nothing sneaky, no lies, just freedom. The room tilted slightly. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. Then came the twist. "It would be one-sided for now. I know you. You're too loyal to want anyone else. That's part of what I love about you. Too loyal." The words sliced through me like thin glass. "So you want to see other people," I said carefully, while I, what? Wait at home and keep things running. He tilted his head, considering. "That sounds harsh when you say it like that. Think of it as balance. You're grounded. I'm restless. This might even make us stronger." I laughed, short and humorless. Stronger. That's one way to define breaking trust. "Susan, come on," he said, leaning forward, tone dripping with false patience. "This isn't about betrayal. It's about growth. You've always been too safe." Maya says. Maya, I interrupted, my voice sharper than intended. Right. The creative director. He didn't flinch. "Yeah, she's been helping me see things differently. She makes me feel alive. You'd like her if you met her." That was when I understood. This conversation wasn't a suggestion, it was a confession dressed as philosophy. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I respect you," he said. "I didn't want to hide it. I want transparency." Transparency. I repeated, my voice flat. "So you can go sleep with someone else and still feel honest." He sighed like I was missing the point. "You're making this sound ugly. I thought you'd understand. You're not like other women. You're rational, mature. You'll see that this is fair." Fair. My pulse thudded in my ears. For a long moment, I just sat there watching the candlelight tremble between us. The smell of garlic had turned acrid. My mind was a storm of memories, late nights, canceled promotions, quiet sacrifices, all the ways I'd built his comfort at the expense of my own. And then something inside me snapped into place. Not anger, not heartbreak, just clarity. If he was going to use my loyalty against me, I'd make it my weapon. I set my fork down, slowly looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Fair enough." He blinked, surprised by how calm I sounded. "That's it," I smiled faintly. "You're right, Nelson. You should do what you need to do." For a second, confusion clouded his face. He was expecting tears, a fight, something to reassure him he still mattered. But I gave him nothing, just silence. He chuckled nervously. "You're taking this well." "Why wouldn't I said, standing to clear the plates. "You've made up your mind." He reached for my hand, relief flashing across his eyes. "See? This is why you're perfect, Elle. You get it. Most women would lose it. Most women," I said softly, "would know better." That night he fell asleep easily, phone buzzing, quietly on the nightstand. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between raindrops. I didn't cry. I didn't even move. I just let the silence swallow me whole. In the dark, I whispered the phrase again, tasting its bitter calm. Fair enough. It was the first time those words didn't mean surrender. It meant I was already gone. After that night, I stopped trying to understand Nelson. He'd built his own world, a small, glittering sphere of parties, rooftop drinks, and creative connections. I became the quiet figure in the background, the one who made sure the bills were paid and the Wi-Fi stayed connected so he could post photos of his new adventures. He thought my silence was permission. In truth, it was preparation. Weeks passed. He started coming home later, smelling like citrus and smoke. He'd talk about Maya casually, like she was an idea rather than a person. "She challenges me," he'd say, pouring wine without offering me a glass. "She says I've been living too comfortably." Then he'd glance at me with something like pity. "You wouldn't get it, Susan. You like structure." He wasn't wrong. I did like structure. It made it easy to dismantle things quietly. I began planning the exit he never imagined I was capable of. During the day, I worked as usual, stable, dependable, invisible. At night, I went through every shared account, every subscription, every lease document. I made neat folders labeled essential and unnecessary. I set up mail forwarding to my friend's address in Portland. I spoke to HR about a temporary relocation request. When I packed, it wasn't in a rush, it was clinical. Passport, laptop, my grandmother's bracelet, everything else, the joint furniture, the decor I'd chosen, the matching mugs that read his and hers, I left untouched. They belonged to the version of me who believed he was my forever. One evening, as he scrolled through his phone, laughing at a message, I looked at him properly for the first time in weeks. He seemed smaller somehow, not physically, just reduced. Like the more he tried to look free, the more transparent he became. Heading to Maya's tonight, I asked my tone neutral. He smirked. Networking dinner. You know how it is. Of course, I said. Wouldn't want to hold you back. He didn't hear the weight behind the words. The night before I left, I made him dinner one last time. Not out of love, but ritual, the closing act of a play that had run too long. He barely noticed when I sat across from him eating in silence. He was too busy texting his thumb, flicking across the screen like a nervous tick. When he left the table, muttering something about catching up later, I washed the dishes slowly, methodically. I wanted the memory to be ordinary. No fights, no shouting, no tears, just the sound of water and plates, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint laughter from his phone in the next room. At midnight, while he slept, I logged into our shared account. I transferred half the savings to his name, not out of kindness, but closure. He'd always claimed fairness mattered. So I gave him fair. Then I canceled the streaming subscriptions, unsubscribed from grocery deliveries, and removed my name from the lease. By the time the sun began to rise, the only trace of me left in that apartment was the faint scent of lavender from the pillow. I placed my keys on the kitchen counter. On top of them, a note with 2 words, fair enough. At dawn, I wheeled my suitcase down the hall, each step strangely light. The world outside smelled of rain and asphalt, clean, sharp, new. The cab driver looked at me through the rearview mirror. Airport, yes, I said. One way. As the city blurred past the window, I realized I wasn't running away. I was simply walking out of a story that no longer deserved me. And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like freedom. The first thing I noticed after leaving was the sound, or rather the absence of it. No clinking of Nelson's empty bottles on the counter, no low music bleeding from his studio, just the hum of the ocean outside my temporary apartment and the whisper of wind through an open window. I'd taken a short-term lease in Astoria, a coastal town a few states north where I'd once vacationed during college. My friend Nadia, a quiet soul who lived off freelance writing and herbal tea, offered me her spare room until I found my footing. Stay as long as you need, she said, handing me a mug of chamomile. You look like you've been holding your breath for years. She wasn't wrong. The first week felt surreal. I still woke up expecting to hear Nelson's alarm to see his shoes by the door, but the only footsteps were my own. The air was lighter, freer. For the first time in years, I wasn't somebody's emotional caretaker. I was just me. I worked remotely for my company, setting up my laptop by the window overlooking the bay. I hiked the cliffs in the mornings, wrote in my journal at night, and slowly the ache began to dull. Healing didn't come like sunlight. It came like the tide, slow and deliberate, washing away what didn't belong. By day 3, his messages started. Day 3, hey, how's the conference going? Miss you a little. Day 5, you've been quiet. Everything okay? Call me tonight. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Each message felt like someone knocking on a door I'd already bricked shut. A week later, the tone shifted. Day 10, I don't understand what's happening. You said fair enough, remember I thought we were okay. It made me laugh, a dry, humorless sound. Okay. He still thought it was an arrangement, that my leaving was part of some temporary experiment in freedom. By the second week, friends began reaching out. Not mine, his. Tom, an old mutual from his art circle, messaged me on Instagram. Hey, just a heads up, Nelson's been a wreck. Maya ditched him. Heard she hooked up with one of their clients and left him humiliated at some party. I read it once, maybe twice, then closed the app. There was no satisfaction in knowing he was suffering. Just confirmation that the storm had finally turned on the one who created it. His next message came late one night. Susan, please, I made a mistake. Maya's not who I thought she was. You were always there for me. I miss you. I didn't even open it fully, just deleted the notification and went back to reading. Each ignored message felt less like revenge and more like rebirth. Silence was my new language, and it spoke louder than any apology ever could. By the end of the month, he was unraveling. He called from blocked numbers, emailed me through our old shared calendar invites, even asked Caleb, his younger brother, to reach out. Caleb's message was short and sharp. "He's miserable, Susan. He says you ghosted him. That's cruel. At least talk to him once." I stared at the words for a long moment before typing my response. "Cruelty is staying somewhere you're unloved." Then I hit send, blocked the number, and went to bed. Each morning, I woke lighter. I stopped checking my phone compulsively. I started sleeping through the night. Nadia and I would sit on her porch after dinner, watching gulls trace lazy arcs over the sea. One night she asked, "Do you think he'll stop?" I smiled faintly. "When there's no echo left." She tilted her head. "And if he doesn't, then he'll just be talking to himself," I said. And with that, I realized something I didn't need closure from him. The silence was the closure. The version of me that once needed his validation had been replaced by someone stronger, quieter, and far more dangerous to the kind of man who thrived on control. Freedom didn't look like a plane ticket or a new city. It looked like peace, still vast and deafening to anyone who'd mistaken my silence for weakness. It had been nearly 3 months since I left when the world finally tested my resolve. I'd started to rebuild something resembling a life, a rhythm. Mornings filled with salt air and tea afternoons, spent coding for clients who didn't know my history evenings, writing small reflections that would never be published. I'd even started smiling at strangers again. Then came Caleb's call. I almost didn't answer, but his name flashed on my screen, familiar and unwanted. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Susan," he said, skipping any greeting. His tone carried that particular brand of family righteousness that always assumes the man's version of events must be the truth. "You've made your point. He's been drinking, barely sleeping. You could at least talk to him once." I stared out at the gray sea through the window. "Caleb, I made peace with this months ago. He made a mistake, okay? He knows that now. Good. Then he can learn from it," I said, my voice even. "You're seriously just going to leave him hanging, Caleb," I said softly. Nelson didn't hang. He jumped. I just stepped aside. He went silent. I ended the call before he found a way to make me second-guess myself. A week later, the inevitable happened. A mutual friend invited me to a birthday party at a small restaurant downtown. I almost didn't go, but Nadia nudged me out of the house. "You've been hiding," she said. "You deserve a night where no one knows your story." But fate has a way of sitting uninvited at the same table. Nelson was there. I saw him the moment I walked in, thinner, paler eyes, rimmed red, like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. He looked like a ghost wearing my memories. For a heartbeat, I felt something flicker, not love, but recognition. He spotted me and froze mid-conversation. He approached, glass of whiskey trembling slightly in his hand. "Susan," he breathed, as though saying my name might break a curse. "Nelson." My voice came out steadier than I expected. He stared at me for a long time, scanning my face like he was searching for the woman who used to sit on the couch waiting for him to come home. "You look different," he said finally. "I am," I replied. He gave a weak smile. I deserve that. The room around us buzzed with laughter and music, but we stood in this suspended bubble of quiet. "I messed everything up," he said, voice breaking slightly. "Maya was—" Don't I cut in. "You don't have to explain her to me. I just need you to know that it wasn't about her. It was about me being restless," I said. "You told me that already." He nodded, shame heavy in his eyes. I thought freedom would make me feel alive. It just made me feel lost. I looked at him then, really looked, and saw not the man I'd loved, but the boy he'd always been chasing, thrills terrified of stillness. "You wanted adventure," I said quietly. "You found it." "Susan, please," he whispered. "Can we just start over?" I almost pitied him. Almost. But behind me, I heard a warm voice. "Susan, you made it." It was Leon, a landscape architect I'd met on one of my coastal hikes. Kind eyes, slow to speak, the opposite of everything Nelson had been. He walked over and greeted me with an easy smile, his hand brushing mine, small, natural, real. Nelson's expression shifted instantly, the color draining from his face. "You're with him?" he asked. "Yes," I said simply. "He doesn't need to open anything to know what he wants." For a moment, Nelson looked like he might cry. Then his features hardened pride, pulling at the edges. "So that's it. You just erase people." I met his gaze. "No, Nelson. I just stopped keeping space for the ones who never earned it." He swallowed, nodding faintly, eyes wet. "You'll regret this." I almost smiled. "You said that before. Turns out regret's your thing, not mine." Leon placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Everything okay?" Yeah, I said. Just letting go of something heavy. Nelson turned away, then melting into the crowd, his silhouette swallowed by laughter that no longer included him. Later that night, as Leon and I walked along the pier, I finally understood the difference between peace and numbness. Numbness is silence that hurts. Peace is silence that heals. Nelson's voice might still echo somewhere in my past, but it no longer reached me. The tide had risen too high, and I had drifted too far. 6 months after I disappeared from Nelson's life, I moved into a sunlit apartment overlooking the sea. The kind of place I'd once imagined we'd share, except now it was mine alone. No mismatched furniture, no half-finished canvases littering the floor. Just quiet order and plants thriving on the balcony. I sat at my small desk one morning, the scent of salt and jasmine drifting through the open window, and realized something simple but profound. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the absence of needing to be understood by someone who never listened. My phone buzzed once, a new email. The subject line read, "One last thing." It was from Nelson. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I made coffee, let the steam curl into the air, watched the waves roll in. When I finally clicked it open, it was shorter than I expected. I saw a photo of you on Leon's page. You look happy. I mean it. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't realize loyalty like yours was rare until I lost it. Take care, Susan. I read it twice, then archived it. Not out of anger, out of indifference. His words carried no weight anymore. They were echoes bouncing off walls I'd already torn down. That afternoon, Leon stopped by, with groceries and 2 takeaway coffees. He had paint smudges on his hands, his hair wind-tossed from a morning at a construction site. He smiled when he saw me typing at my desk. "Working on that story again?" he asked. "Sort of," I said. "More like a goodbye letter I'll never send." He kissed my temple lightly. "Then maybe it's not for him. Maybe it's for you." I nodded. He was right. The story wasn't about Nelson anymore. It was about me, the woman who'd learned that silence can be strength that leaving isn't running, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. That evening, we walked along the beach. The sky was the color of fading gold, the tide brushing our ankles. Leon reached down, lacing his fingers with mine. "You still think about him sometimes?" he asked gently. Sometimes, I admitted, but not with pain, more like remembering an old dream, one I finally woke up from. He smiled. "That's fair." I laughed quietly. "Fair enough," I said the words that had once been a surrender, now a seal of peace. We stood there for a while, watching the last light vanish beneath the horizon. The water was cold, the wind sharp, but inside I felt warm, steady. In the distance, a seagull's cry echoed, fading into the dusk. I turned my face to the wind and whispered to the sea, not as a prayer, but as a truth. I used to love a man who mistook my loyalty for weakness. I left him and found myself. That's the story.